It was raining hard. Big, heavy drops fell from the sky, soaking the streets, the trees, and everything around. The wind was cold and sharp, like little knives against the skin. People stayed inside their homes, warm and safe. But outside one large house at the end of the street, a woman stood with her small child. Her name was Priya. She was just 28 years old. Her face was pale. Her lips were shaking from the cold. She had no umbrella, no coat, and no one beside her except her 5-year-old son, Arav. The little boy was crying, holding his mother's hand tightly. "Mama, it hurts," he said in a soft, scared voice. His tiny arm had scratches. There was blood on his elbow. His shirt was torn and his small feet were bare on the wet ground. He had no shoes. Priya looked down at him, her heart breaking into pieces. She wanted to pick him up and run far away, but she had nowhere to go. Few minutes earlier, they had both been inside the house. That house had once belonged to her husband, but now he was gone, dead for almost a year. After he died, everything changed. Her husband's family, the same people who smiled during the wedding, who blessed her during her pregnancy, now treated her like garbage. "You are nothing without our son," her mother-in-law had screamed that night. "You and your bastard child don't belong in our house," Priya had tried to explain, to beg. But no one listened. Her brother-in-law had grabbed her arm and pushed her out. Her sari tore at the shoulder. Then someone kicked her, hard. Her son tried to stop them, but they slapped him too. And now, here they were, standing in the rain. Beaten, hurt, alone. She could still hear the sound of the door slamming behind them. Boom. It was the sound of rejection, the sound of being thrown out like trash. Arav shivered beside her. She took off her dupatta and wrapped it around him, even though it was already soaked. Cars passed by on the road in front, a white car, then a red one, then a motorbike. No one stopped. People glanced, then looked away. A man walking past held up his phone and started recording them. Priya looked away, feeling ashamed. What had she done to deserve this? She looked up at the sky and whispered, "God, why us?" She wanted to scream, to cry, but she had to stay strong. For Arav, suddenly she heard the soft sound of tires slowing down. A black luxury car pulled up and stopped right in front of them. It was a big car, clean, shiny, expensive. The back window slowly rolled down. A man sat inside wearing a dark suit. His face was sharp, serious. He looked rich, very rich. His eyes moved from Priya's face to the child and then back to Priya. For a moment, he didn't say anything. His eyes showed no emotion. Priya quickly looked away, thinking he might also yell or ask them to move. She pulled her son behind her, ready to protect him again. But then the man opened the door. He stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. Slowly, he took off his coat and walked toward them. He bent down, wrapped the coat around Arav, and looked into the child's eyes. "What happened to you two?" he asked softly. Priya couldn't speak. Her throat was dry. She wanted to tell him everything, but the words were stuck. All she could do was cry quietly. The man looked up at her, his face still calm, but something had changed in his eyes. There was concern, there was anger, but not at her. His driver stepped out and rushed toward him. "Sir, we're already late." "The meeting—" The man raised his hand to stop him. "Tell them I'll be even later," he said firmly. "This is more important." He turned back to Priya. "Get in," he said. She froze. What did he mean? Who was this man? Priya looked at Arav. He was still shivering, but his eyes were fixed on the man. For the first time that night, there was a little bit of hope in them. Priya hesitated. She didn't know if it was safe, but she also knew staying outside could kill them. With shaking hands, she nodded. The man helped her and Arav into the back seat. The warm air inside the car wrapped around them like a hug. As they drove off, Priya looked back one last time at the house where she was beaten, insulted, and thrown out. She had nothing now. Nothing, except the coat of a stranger, the warmth of a car, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this man would change their lives forever. She had no idea who he was, but soon. The world would know why he stopped his car that rainy night. The black luxury car moved slowly through the city. Inside, the seats were soft and warm. The rain outside tapped gently against the windows. But inside the car, there was silence. Priya held her son close. Arav had finally stopped crying. He leaned against her shoulder, eyes half closed. The man's coat still wrapped around his small body like a blanket. But Priya, she could not relax. Who was this man? Why had he stopped? And where was he taking them? She glanced at him through the glass divider. He sat in the front next to the driver. His face was serious, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He hadn't said another word since they entered the car. Priya tried to speak. "Sir, where are we going?" The man didn't turn around, but his voice came through the intercom beside her seat. "You both need a doctor, then food, then rest." Priya blinked. He was right. Her side still hurt from where she had been kicked. Arav's scratches needed to be cleaned. But why was he helping? She tried again. I don't have money." The man's voice stayed calm. "I didn't ask for any." Priya's throat tightened. For a long time, no one had been kind to her without expecting something in return. Not since her husband passed away. She sat quietly, unsure what to feel. The car soon stopped outside a private clinic. A nurse came running with an umbrella. The man stepped out first and then gently helped Priya and Arav. The doctor didn't ask any questions. He treated them with care, cleaned Arav's wounds, and gave Priya medicine for her bruises. Afterwards, they were taken to a quiet cafe nearby. Warm soup, fresh bread, and hot tea waited on the table. Arav ate quickly. It had been a full day since their last meal. Priya tried to eat slowly, but her hands were still shaking. Finally, when the table was cleared, the man spoke again. "My name is Karan Mehta." He looked straight at Priya for the first time. She froze. That name. She had heard it before, on the news, in the papers. He was one of the richest businessmen in the city, owner of hotels, malls, and even tech companies. His face had been on magazine covers, and now He was sitting across from her, helping her, feeding her son. Priya could not believe it. Why? Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice soft and scared. You don't know us. Karen leaned back in his chair. For the first time, a small sadness appeared in his eyes. I knew someone once, he said slowly. A woman like you, strong, brave. She was thrown out too, just like this. I didn't help her in time. He didn't say more, but Priya saw it in his eyes. He was remembering someone he had lost. She nodded quietly. Sometimes pain doesn't need many words. Karan stood. You can stay in my guest house tonight. It's safe. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. Priya stood up quickly. Please, sir, I don't want charity. He shook his head. This isn't charity. You and your son didn't deserve what happened. I don't know your full story yet, but I know injustice when I see it. He turned to Arav and smiled softly. Let's get you both some real rest. They walked out of the cafe. The rain had stopped, but the air was still cold. Priya followed quietly, her mind full of questions. As the car started again, she whispered a silent prayer. Who was this man? Really? Why had he chosen her to help? What did he mean when he said, we'll talk tomorrow? She didn't know it yet, but this man behind the glass, he was about to change everything, and her old in-laws. They were about to get the biggest shock of their lives. The black car moved slowly through the quiet streets. Priya held Arav close. He was sleeping peacefully now, his tiny hand curled around her arm. For the first time in days, he looked safe. But Priya couldn't sleep. Her heart was full of questions. Who was this man, really? What did he want? And why was he helping them like this? Soon, the car stopped in front of a beautiful house. It wasn't huge like a palace, but it was peaceful, warm, and full of light. The garden was green. Soft lights glowed from the windows. This is your guest house, Karan said. He stepped out and opened the door for her himself. Priya was shocked. A rich man doing this much for a stranger? Thank you, she whispered. Inside, everything was clean and welcoming. The staff didn't stare. They smiled gently and helped her get settled. One lady brought clothes for Arav and a soft toy. Another showed Priya the bathroom and gave her clean towels. Later that night, after Arav fell asleep in the cozy bed, Priya stepped out into the hallway. She found Karan sitting on the garden bench outside. She walked slowly towards him. Sir, can I ask you something? He looked up, nodded once. Why are you helping me? Most people don't even look at us. They drive past like we're dirt. Karan looked at the stars. I don't like injustice, he said softly, and I've seen too much of it. He took a deep breath. You know, when I was a boy, I was poor. I lived in the streets with my mother. She was kind, but no one helped us. One day, some rich people beat her up, said she was dirty. She cried the whole night, but no one came, not even the police. Priya's eyes widened. I told myself then, Karan said, his voice tight with emotion, if I ever became rich, I would never ignore someone like her. Like you. Priya looked down. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not even her husband. Karan stood up and handed her a small envelope. "I found out something about your in-laws," he said. "They lied to the police, told them you attacked them. That's why no one came to help you." Priya's heart dropped. "What?" He nodded. "They want your husband's property. And they know. If you and your son disappear quietly, no one will ask questions." Tears filled Priya's eyes. She remembered the way her mother-in-law smiled when she pushed them out in the rain. "They want to erase us," she whispered. Karan's voice turned firm. "They won't succeed. I promise." He looked her in the eyes. "You're not alone anymore." Priya was quiet. For the first time in years, she felt something she had forgotten. Hope. Just then, Arav called out from inside. "Mama?" Priya turned. "Coming, Beta." As she stepped back inside, she paused and looked at Karan once more. She didn't know where this road would lead, but she knew now. Someone powerful was walking beside her, and her in-laws. They were about to learn that the woman they threw out like trash was coming back with a storm. The next morning, sunlight filled the guest house. Birds chirped outside, and a soft breeze came through the open windows. Priya woke up slowly. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then she saw Arav sleeping safely beside her, and she remembered. She was not in her in-laws' house anymore. She was not on the street. She was in a safe place. Thanks to Karan. After breakfast, a staff member knocked gently on her door. "Sir is ready to speak with you," the woman said kindly. Priya got dressed and walked nervously to the office room. Her hands trembled slightly. What would he say? Would he still help her? Would he ask her to leave? She opened the door slowly. Karan sat at a large desk, papers and a laptop in front of him. He looked up and smiled gently. "Please sit." Priya sat down across from him, heart racing. Karan leaned forward. "I made some calls last night. Your in-laws have been hiding many things." He opened a file and showed her documents, bank transfers, property papers, police reports. Priya couldn't believe it. "All this belongs to your late husband," Karan said. "Your son Arav is the legal heir, but they've been forging documents, transferring property under fake names." Priya stared in shock. "They said they would protect us," she whispered. "After my husband died, they said we were family." Karan's voice became cold. "They only wanted the money. They never cared about you or Arav." Priya looked at him. "So what now?" Karan smiled, but it wasn't a soft smile. It was sharp, powerful. "Now, we fight." He slid a folder across the table. "I've hired the best legal team in the city. You'll get everything back, and not just the property. We'll make sure your in-laws answer for what they did." Priya blinked. "You mean, take them to court?" Karan nodded. "And expose them." Priya looked down at her hands. She had never fought anyone in her life. She had always stayed quiet, even when people insulted her, for her son's sake, for peace. But now, she remembered Arav crying in the rain. She remembered her bruises, her blood on the street. No. This time, she would not stay quiet. She looked up at Karan, her voice steady. I'm ready. Karan nodded. Good. But first, we'll need proof, something solid. He stood and walked to a side table. He pulled out a small device, a hidden camera. Priya's eyes widened. You're going back, Karan said. Just for one day, to your in-laws. You'll wear this. Priya froze. What? Karan's voice stayed calm. You'll pretend you want to apologize. Tell them you want to come back. We'll record everything they say. Priya's heart pounded. Won't they hurt me again? Karan nodded slowly. They might, but this time we'll be watching. My team will stay close. The moment it gets dangerous, we'll step in. Priya looked down, thinking. She didn't want to see those faces again. The faces of the people who had laughed while she bled. But then she looked at her son through the window. Arav was playing with a toy truck on the grass, smiling for the first time in days. Her eyes filled with strength. I'll do it. She said firmly. For Arav, for justice. Karan smiled. Then let's begin. Priya stood in front of the house once again. The same house where her blood had touched the floor. The same gate where she was thrown out like trash. But this time, she was not alone in spirit. She wore a small hidden camera tucked into the collar of her kurta. Her phone was connected to Karan's team. They were watching from a black van parked down the street. Priya took a deep breath. Behind her soft eyes was steel now. She pressed the doorbell. After a long pause, the door opened. Her mother-in-law stood there, arms crossed, eyes cold. Oh, look who came crawling back, she said, smirking. What happened? The street's too rough for you and your bastard son? Priya's fists clenched inside her sleeves, but she stayed calm. I just want to come home, she said softly. For Arav. The older woman laughed. Of course you. Tui says maybe you finally learned your place. Priya stepped inside. The hallway still smelled the same, of rich incense and rot. Her father-in-law sat on the sofa reading the newspaper. He looked up. Well, well. Didn't expect to see you again. Priya bowed her head slightly. I'm sorry, Bauji. I made a mistake leaving. Please, let us stay. He folded the newspaper. What changed your mind? I realized I can't raise Arav alone. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good. We were hoping you'd come back before the will gets finalized. Priya's heart skipped a beat. She kept her face blank. What will? Her mother-in-law chuckled. Oh, just some paperwork your foolish husband left behind. We've almost taken care of it. Taken care? Priya asked. Don't act smart. The woman snapped. That property is ours now. You think we'll let a child like Arav own anything? The father-in-law nodded. We already forged the new documents. In a week it'll all be ours. They laughed, and the camera captured every word. Priya sat down slowly. Her body was calm, but inside her blood boiled. I just want my son safe, she whispered. Then stay quiet, her mother-in-law said. No police, no drama, and maybe we won't throw you out again. Outside the house, Karen listened through his earpiece. His jaw tightened. He had heard enough. He pressed a button. Team, move in, now. Inside, Priya was handed a tray. Go. Make tea, her mother-in-law ordered. You're back in this house, but only as a servant. Priya walked to the kitchen slowly. Then, the doorbell rang again. Loud knocks followed. The father-in-law frowned. Who is it? He opened the door and froze. Karan stood there in a black coat surrounded by 2 lawyers and 2 police officers. Good morning, Karan said calmly. I believe this house is part of a criminal investigation now. What? The mother-in-law, screamed. Karen stepped in. Forged property, physical abuse, illegal transfer of assets. You're all under suspicion. The officers stepped forward. The father-in-law dropped the newspaper. Priya came out of the kitchen, her face calm. Karan turned to her. You were very brave. She looked at her in-laws, who were now pale and shaking, and she finally said what her heart had wanted to scream for years. You tried to destroy us. She pointed to Arav's small school bag by the door. But that boy will grow up free, strong, and richer than all of you. 3 months later, the same street where Priya and Arav were once thrown out now looked different, not because the road had changed, but because they had changed. Priya stood in front of a beautiful new home, a home built in her son's name. She looked proud. Not because it was big, not because it was fancy, but because she had earned this peace. Beside her, Arav giggled, holding a new school bag in one hand and his favorite toy truck in the other. Are we rich now, Mama? He asked sweetly. Priya smiled. We are rich in love, baby. And yes, now we have money too, she said, brushing his hair. After the court case, everything had changed. Karan's legal team proved that Priya's in-laws had stolen property and money that belonged to her late husband, and now to Arav. The judge ruled in their favor. All the stolen money and land was returned. The in-laws were fined and warned. One even went to jail for forgery. Karen helped Priya open a trust fund in Nadiadana Arav's name. It would grow with interest until he turned 21. But even more than the money, Priya had earned her dignity back. She had faced the storm and walked out stronger. Now, she worked at one of Karan's companies, not as a favor, but because she had talent. She helped with women's shelters and legal support for abused women. She had made her pain into power. At a school nearby, little Arav was now one of the top students in his class. The teachers loved him. He was kind, bright, and always smiling. Sometimes, he drew pictures of a man with a black car and showed it proudly. That's Uncle Karan, he'd say. He saved us. And he had. But Karen always said, your mother saved you. I just helped open the door. One Sunday, Karen came to visit. He brought ice cream and new books for Arav. They all sat in the garden, laughing, as the sun began to set. Priya looked at the sky. She remembered the night she was in the rain, bleeding, afraid. She had thought her life was over, but now she was whole again. She turned to Karen. Why did you help us? She asked softly. Karen smiled. Because years ago, someone helped my mother too. I was just returning the kindness. Tears filled Priya's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. He shook his head. Thank you for not giving up. As the stars came out that night, Arav ran across the lawn, his laughter echoing, and Priya knew. No matter how dark life gets, even a single act of kindness can change everything. Forever. 2 years passed. Arav was now 7 years old. He had grown taller, happier, and stronger. He no longer had fear in his eyes, only dreams. Priya, too, had become a respected name. She was no longer just a survivor. She was now a voice for many. She had helped build 2 shelters for abused women. She spoke at schools. She gave hope to those who had none. One morning she received an envelope. There was no name on it, just a golden stamp. She opened it slowly. Her hands began to shake. Inside was an invitation. You are invited to the National Courage Awards. You have been nominated as Mother of the Year. Priya's eyes filled with tears. She held the letter against her chest. 2 weeks later, the lights were bright, cameras flashed, reporters whispered. Arav stood beside Priya, dressed in a small black suit. She wore a simple white sari, glowing with grace. The host stepped on stage. Tonight, he said, we honor a woman who walked through fire and came out carrying others with her. People clapped. Some stood. Then, the screen behind the stage lit up. A video played of Priya's journey from the rainy street to the court case, to the day she opened her first shelter. People in the hall cried. Arav held his mother's hand tightly. Then the host smiled and said, but the biggest surprise is who will present her this award. The crowd turned, and from behind the curtains, the Prime Minister himself walked out. Even Priya gasped. He took the stage holding a golden trophy. I have heard many stories in my life, he said, but this one touched my soul. He turned to Priya. You are the kind of mother every child deserves, the kind of hero this country needs. He handed her the award. The crowd stood and clapped louder than ever. Arav hugged her tightly, whispering, you did it, Mama. But Priya only smiled and said, no, baby, we did it. Final scene. As they walked off the stage, a journalist stopped her. Ma'am, what would you say to other mothers who are suffering like you once did? Priya looked straight at the camera and said, don't give up. Your pain does not define you. Your courage does. Then she walked away, her son's hand in hers, toward a future they had built with strength, tears, and love.